Hello and welcome again to What If Natives Won, a video blog and channel about alternate history and American Indians, Native Americans, indigenous peoples. This is the 21st video of 28 planned ones. My name is Al Carroll. I'm Associate Professor of History at Northern Virginia Community College. I've written mostly about wars, veterans, human rights, and genocide. I'm also, together with Rob Schmidt of Bluecorn Comics, editing and putting out a short story collection, What If Natives Won. This is what this video blog and channel are about. There's a huge lack of alternate history written about American Indians, indigenous people. Many people don't like to think about genocides in America. They likely were never taught about them. Many don't want to be reminded, want to believe these genocides never happened, or it was somehow an accident. I've had great success using alternate history to teach my students, show them absolutely nothing in history was inevitable. It never had to be. The worst of human history is always a conscious choice. How things turn out is based on how evil the evil choose to be, and how well and how strongly good people choose to stand up to them or stop them. The way things turn out in history took a very specific set of circumstances. Sometimes history turns on very small things. Change even one and you have an entirely different history, different present, different society. It may be hard to hear this, but we live right now in a dystopian world, one of the worst of all possible outcomes for anyone who is not white. America is today 98% non-native. At least 75 million to 112 million natives were killed by not one genocide, but a series of them. The last of them ended only in the year 2000 in Peru. And they also happened in America, Brazil, Canada, Guatemala, Argentina, Mexico, and elsewhere. On top of that is massive genocide denial. This is not taught in almost all American schools. There are racist images everywhere that are often not admitted to be racist. But all this could change if a German-Comanche alliance defeats the so-called Republic of Texas. There are two ways this could happen. The first is a revolt against Texas led by Prince Carroll Solms Braunfels. The second is a revolt led by no less than Karl Marx himself. First, we need to explain the background of German colonists in Texas. Most were well-educated radicals. Germany at that time was dozens of small states, rigid monarchies with official state churches, censorship, and political prisoners. There was a wave of radicalism in Germany and most of Europe. Democratic, early utopian socialist, early anarchist, and soon to be communist. Most German immigrants to the U.S. were also freethinkers, anti-religious, deist, agnostic, atheist. They were strong believers in education, reason, enlightenment, gender and racial social equality, and were very anti-racist, anti-slavery, anti-monarchy, anti-capitalist, and sometimes anti-government of any kind. In 1842, several dozen liberal German nobles founded the Adelsverein, or Society for Protection of Immigration. By the time the U.S. took Texas from Mexico and provoked a war, there were over 9,000 German colonists. Among their achievements were founding dozens of towns, schools, newspapers, and the Treaty of Meusbach with the Comanche Nation, pledging to avoid violence and pass freely through each other's territory and trade. During the Civil War, 1 out of 6 Union soldiers were German. The Confederacy massacred almost 3 dozen Germans in Texas who refused to be drafted to fight for slavery. This monument remembers them. In 1844, Prince Carl Solms Braunfels plotted a revolt against the Texas so-called Republic. It was never free nor an actual nation. As discussed in previous videos, it was guilty of horrific ethnic cleansing of natives and Mexicans, and was intended from the start to be a U.S. slave state. The prince was an experienced military officer. German immigrant leaders deliberately colonized away from white American towns, starting what is today called the German Hill Country, the area north of San Antonio and west of Austin. It's a hilly area with many narrow valleys that would make attack difficult. The plan was to lead 9,000 German colonists against Texas in 1844. But U.S. authorities found out, seizing weapons going to the hill country. The plan ended. The Adelsverein closed down. The prince returned to Germany. Many more German radicals came to Texas, but they would not plot against Texas or the U.S. again until 1915. joining the plan of San Diego uprising by Mexican anarchists. What if U.S. authorities had not blocked the plot, never even discovered it? The Texas Army and Rangers were over 3,000, but they were deployed against Mexico, native nations, and their own internal fighting. The hill country could be easily defended on any of the half-dozen routes Texas insurgents would attack. This new Germany already had good relations with 30,000 Comanches to their north and west, signing the Treaty of Meusbach. The would-be Texas Republic had repeatedly massacred or attacked Comanches. They would be eager to ally with this new German state. Comanches could attack, then retreat to the protection of Neue Deutschland. Other allies would include 40,000 black slaves. Germans were strongly anti-slavery. The quarter of the Texas population that is enslaved, many will flee to New Deutschland. Comanche raids free many more. The already disastrous Texas economy falls apart. More troops and overseers fight slave uprisings and mass escapes. The last Neue Deutschland allies would be the 5,000 Mexicans within Texas that had escaped ethnic cleansing. This includes San Antonio, where Germans had intervened to prevent white American expulsion of Tejanos. There were also thousands more Mexicans in the Nueces Strip loyal to Mexico. Texas would now be hemmed in from its west and south. Most vulnerable of all would be its new capital, Austin, named for the colonizer who led ethnic cleansing against the Karankawa Nation. The town was only 5 years old and had less than 900 people, a fourth of them enslaved Africans. The capital captured or destroyed, many insurgents flee, much like during the runaway scrape in 1836. The hollowed-out, chaotic, failing Texas could easily be reconquered by a Mexican army. In our own time, there was a long history of Germans in Mexico since the 1840s. Mexico could recognize Neue Deutschland, make it a protectorate or ally, a buffer against the U.S., its alliance with Comanches very useful. If Mexico turns on Germans and Comanches, that would be a bad strategic mistake. What would the U.S. do? Pro-slavery factions still want Texas as a slave state. Insurgent refugees no doubt try to win sympathy and start a war. If James Polk wins the presidency, as he did in our own time, no doubt the war begins. But the U.S. will have a harder fight and a harder time holding on to what had been Texas. But if the president is not Polk, who only won by a long shot, then Neue Deutschland stays free. What had been Texas could be further colonized by another radical group. French utopian socialists led by Victor Considerant colonized the Dallas area in the 1840s in our own time. They were plagued by a dishonest land speculator and poor planning. If Mexico invites them in as a further buffer against the U.S., they, plus the return of Tejanos and natives, guarantee no further successful U.S. invasions. Then pro-slavery secessionists, fearful of a majority of free states in the U.S., likely start the Civil War 5 to 10 years earlier. A second but less likely way for a German-Comanche alliance and radical German state in central Texas is if Karl Marx moved to Texas in 1844 as he originally planned. He would attempt the first communist revolution there, recruiting German socialists and abolitionists, black slaves, Mexicans, and natives. The biggest barrier to this may be Marx's own nature. He was a skilled theoretician, which is why he today remains very influential because of his critiques of capitalism, but far less for his proposed solutions, which turned out so disastrously. As an organizer, he was not very skilled. He may attempt to gather followers for an uprising and simply wind up murdered by rangers, or be expelled, or flee. An interesting variation is to combine both possibilities, both the prince's successful uprising followed by Marx using Neue Deutschland to recruit for his ideas. He might find many followers for his proposed world revolution among German and French utopian socialists, runaway slaves, and abolitionists. In our own time, he was a friend and influence on no less than Lincoln. And Lincoln presided over the largest destruction of capital and the greatest defeat of capitalism in U.S. history. A socialist Republican Party in the 1860s or 70s is an interesting possibility. Any of these points of departure lead to a Mexico which avoids U.S. invasion. That means no California Indian genocide. These points of departure also mean a surviving, perhaps independent or allied Comanche nation, and the return of some of the native peoples ethnically cleansed from Texas. That certainly counts as native victory. This is the end of the 21st video. I look forward to your comments and questions and will answer them as often as I can. Racism, genocide, denial, childish behavior, personal attacks get deleted. But I do recognize some questions will be asked in ignorance because much of the facts I point to are new to most people. They were never taught about this. They've been raised in denial since denying indigenous genocides is taught in almost all public schools. Next time we will discuss, what if the U.S. annexes all of Mexico? Please repost freely, subscribe, like, share, and comment. I'll post again in about a week. This has been a What If Natives Won video blog and channel.